Okay, so this is the second video lecture on the chapter of social class in the U.S. And in the previous one, I had defined stratification and I moved into breaking down this idea of social class. And I remember the word I was looking for because I was talking about how wealth is the most uneven distributed. In other words, there's the most uneven, fewer people on the majority of the businesses and property that generate money. Most of us don't own anything. But for those of us, but of the rest of us that don't own anything, the most common thing that we own is a house. And the word I was looking for was equity. That's the word I was looking for. So that means you buy a house, you pay $100,000, you make payments. Now your house is worth $150,000. You can now borrow $50 of credit, and then $50,000 of credit, and that allows you to buy another house. And this is how you generate, or you can buy multiple houses, right? And that's the most common way to generate intergenerational wealth, to pass that on to your children. Because you could, after you pay that off in 30 years, you now have property that is worth, 3 times what you paid for it. You give it to your children, then they can borrow money on it, etc., etc. Another thing that contributes to our accumulation of wealth is unemployment. If you think about wealth as also being those stocks and bonds that you own because your job paid into, say, TIAA, CREF, or some sort of mutual fund, then when you're not employed and you don't have an opportunity to buy those mutual funds, then you don't contribute to that generation of wealth. Or maybe you work at a place where they match your college education. I mean, at least that's still true for the time being. I don't think this is going to be true much longer, but for the time being, your education is an investment. It's an investment that potentially you can use that education to get a better job. That means you make more money. And then, of course, inheritance when you inherit stock, when you inherit a business. And inheritance is actually, there's this word for it, and I was going to try to play it in Google Translate. Primogeniture, but it's the technical term for laws that support or ensure that property is inherited to the firstborn child, or in some cases, the firstborn son. Now, like a story that I've told that I may or may not tell in some other chapter is I have ancestors that once upon a time, Callaways, the Callaway Golf Company, right? So I'm a descendant of a Callaway, but I'm a descendant of the girl. So where the boys inherited property, they were actually slaveholders. They inherited property, and in some cases they inherited people. Because I am a descendant of the daughter, my ancestor got $1. So my line of Callaways is not wealthy, but other lines that are descendant of the sons went on to be quite wealthy. And then, of course, income. Income is the cash, right? It may be true that the guy next door's wages are less than yours, but he may in fact be wealthier because he may own stocks, he may own property, he may own business. Your income may be greater, but they will be more wealthy. Income is not as unevenly, even though it's profoundly unequal, as stocks are. So these next several slides are intended to illustrate, and they're a couple years old. It's worse than this now. They're intended to illustrate the profound inequity in the distribution of economic resources. So what's this one intended to illustrate? That you have a single, what's it say? The number of hours for a full-time minimum wage employee would need to work to equal a single hour of pay. So you have a minimum wage employee would need to work 1,300. And again, this is probably, it's at least 5 years old, would need to earn 1,300 hours to earn the same 1 hour wages of this Michael Duke of Walmart. Or this is the restaurant. That's like, it's like Applebee's and Olive Garden owns this company, 421, or except T-Mobile, right, 500. The point is that CEOs, right, the people at the very top of the pyramid, of the organizational pyramid, make not just twice as much or 30 times as much, but 1,372 times more. When we talk about the distribution of wealth or of property, 1%, and this, like I said, it's probably worse than this. The 1%, so that you have a room full of 100 people, one person would own, and you have a room full of 100 people, and you give everybody like $1, right? One person owns more, 1/3, would own $33, and the rest of us, the rest 99 of us, are going to have to divide up $63. And that's not even evenly distributed because some of those people are going to get more and some people are going to be left with nothing. There's a video, let me make sure I still have it. There's a video in this chapter that sort of illustrates that in real time. And again, that's even a few years old. So sort of other ways to think about it. 10%, now you have 10 people in the room are going to own $77. And that's going to leave 90 of us with $23. The average income, you already have it there. Oh, that's a fun one. The average income of the highest paid CEO earns 3,000 times. 3,000, right? Or a full-time, let's see, working full-time since the year Jesus was born, earning $47,000 a year. You need 3,000 more years to equal what the guy at, I believe, Mike Lore of Walmart. This is more of the same. These are just more tables that illustrate the same thing. What these tables illustrate, though, and so, like, I've been a sociologist for 30 years. And when I was learning about this stuff, we were talking about inequality was really profound. But the significance of these charts is that it's getting worse, right? The gap between what the people at the top have and what everybody else has is only getting worse. We're not moving, even though wages have gone up, the fact that the rich are getting richer, they're getting farther and farther away. We think of ourselves as a middle class culture, as a middle class society, but we really are not a middle class society. The middle class, you probably heard that if you listen to the politicians, the middle class is shrinking. There are fewer and fewer people here in the middle. And that's what this one represents. This is the income inequality 1970, the top 1%. This is the 1% here that goes up and down, and the bottom. So the bottom is earning less and the top is earning more. This scale over here breaks it down by racial group. Which is kind of interesting because this blue line, this is white people, and the top line is actually Asian people. So when in another chapter, we'll talk about how the different racial groups compare to each other. And sometimes, and this is probably, it's probably a derogatory statement, but sometimes Asian culture is regarded as the model minority. And this is when I say that like this because that's not completely true, nor is that completely a positive statement. But one of the dynamics that they point to is the greater income that they earn. Black people down here at the bottom, Asians, and then white people right here. Another chart basically of the same thing. Here you have the upper class versus the lower. Here you have the upper, what group, how are we breaking those down? How their earned income went up, middle income people went down, and the poorest people pretty much stay at the bottom. This is CEO pay, so these would be people at the top of an organization. Their pay just continues to go further and further up. What's this? This would be in the 1990s. And the typical worker wages, it doesn't go up at all. And I think that's what that means. Yeah, well, I know that's what that means. They're just different ways of basically saying the same thing. As CEO, this many people will have this many people's 30 seconds to earn what he earns in 30 seconds. This chart, or this one is, again, it's about, it's going on like 8 years old now. It's comparing the relative inequality, and you'll notice the states in the South have more. That means the gap between the people at the top and the people at the bottom are further and further apart compared to some of the northern states. That means the gap, right? There is less of a difference between the wealthy and the poor, but the further, you can see it. That these darker states means that there may be some very wealthy people, but there are also very poor people. All right. Then we move to this concept of power, and I'm going to stop because it seems logical to stop here. And in the next video, I will describe what we mean by power in the sociological context.